Imagine the creators of the most powerful technology in human history, and they swear an oath to protect you.
Right.
But then imagine they realize that breaking that oath could, well, make them billionaires.
It's a heady premise.
It really is. Today we're looking at the multi-billion-dollar blood feud between Elon Musk and OpenAI, but we weren't looking at it through the usual lens of Silicon Valley gossip or, those really dry legal filings.
Yeah, because the underlying questions here, they go so much deeper than just market share or equity. We're
Exactly.
basically talking about the philosophical architecture of the future. And, well, what happens when the people building that future suddenly just change the blueprints?
So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking a fascinating piece of source material and using it to cut through the noise of this massive tech dispute,
Which is definitely needed.
for sure. The text we are exploring is this highly creative. Imagine the creators of the most powerful technology in human history, and they swear an oath to protect you.
Right.
But then imagine they realize that breaking that oath could, well, make them billionaires.
It's a heady premise.
It really is. Today we're looking at the multi-billion-dollar blood feud between Elon Musk and OpenAI, but we aren't looking at it through the usual lens of Silicon Valley gossip or, those really dry legal filings.
Yeah, because the underlying questions here, they go so much deeper than just market share or equity.
Exactly.
We're basically talking about the philosophical architecture of the future. And, well, what happens when the people building that future suddenly just change the blueprints?
So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking a fascinating piece of source material and using it to cut through the noise of this massive tech dispute,
Which is definitely needed.
for sure. The text we are exploring is this highly creative, really philosophical piece. It's titled The Socratic Trial of OpenAI and the Poisoned Well.
And honestly, framing modern tech drama as an ancient Greek dialogue, it's just a phenomenal way to force a completely different perspective.
It really works. I mean, the source imagines a modern journalist sitting down to interview the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates.
Like a literal time travel scenario.
Yeah, and they're discussing the very real world, super high stakes lawsuit where Elon Musk is suing OpenAI and its leader, Sam Altman.
Right.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to use this Socratic dialogue to strip away the modern corporate jargon. The endless talk of valuations, equity caps, compute power.
All the stuff that makes your eyes glaze over.
Exactly. We want to bypass all of that and examine the raw, timeless ethical questions at the absolute heart of AI development.
But before we go any further, I think we really need to establish the ground rules for how we're analyzing this.
Yes, definitely. So, a crucial disclaimer for you listening right now. We are not taking sides in the Musk versus OpenAI dispute.
No, absolutely not.
We are not endorsing Elon Musk's political or business stances, and we are not endorsing Sam Altman's or OpenAI's corporate maneuvers either.
Right.
Our goal today is strictly impartial. We are just here to explore the ideas, the analogies, and the argument exactly as they're presented in this fictional framing.
Because the reason this matters to you, the listener, regardless of who ultimately wins in a court of law, is that these, well, thinking machines, as Socrates called them in our text.
I love that term.
It's great, right? These thinking machines are shaping the very fabric of human society.
Yeah.
And understanding the ethics of the architects building them is really the only way to navigate the modern world without feeling utterly overwhelmed by all this relentless tech bro drama.
So true. Okay, let's start with the original conflict, which the text identifies as the broken promise.
Right.
Because you probably already know the basic timeline, Musk leaves, Altman pivots, Microsoft pours in billions. But what we really need to look at is the philosophical anatomy of that pivot.
Right, the root of it.
Yeah. So the source text outlines OpenAI's original founding charter. The journalist explains to Socrates that this organization wasn't just founded with a nice generic mission statement.
No, it was very specific.
It had a singular, explicit purpose to develop artificial intelligence for the benefit of all humanity, not for profit.
And the text highlights the sheer audacity of that initial promise.
Yeah,
I mean, they were declaring that the most transformative technology ever conceived belonged to everyone.
which is wild.
It is. It was framed at a moral oak, a fiduciary duty to humanity itself, which is just a wildly different starting point than your standard Silicon Valley startup looking for seed funding.
But then we get to the mechanism of the shift. So after Musk left, OpenAI transformed under Sam Altman, and they didn't just quietly start selling software.
Right, they did something much more complicated.
Yeah, they executed this highly unusual, complex legal maneuver, creating a capped profit subsidiary that was governed by the nonprofit board.
A very strange structure.
Very. But that is the structural mechanism that allowed them to attract billions of dollars in venture capital from companies like Microsoft.
Effectively making them a private enterprise serving private interests.
Exactly. And this mechanism is the very thing Musk's lawsuit claims is a betrayal of the founding mission.
Right.
So when Socrates hears the mechanics of this shift in the text, he immediately offers an analogy. He calls it the poisoned well.
Yes. He asks the journalist to imagine a man who walks into the ancient marketplace, the Agora in Athens,
Okay.
and this man announces he's digging a well, and he swears before the gods that the water will flow freely to every single citizen, rich and poor alike.
A noble cause.
Absolutely. The citizens rejoice. Maybe they even help clear the stones or offer tools because they completely trust this earth.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to upgrade that analogy to fit the actual technical reality of how AI is built today. Because it's not just about water, right?
No, it's about data.
Right. So imagine your town decides to build a massive public library, and the developers explicitly promise that if the community helps stock the shelves, access will be free forever.
Okay, I see where you're going.
So all the citizens, they donate their private journals, their family recipes, their life's work.
Which represents humanity's scraped data that trains these AI models.
Exactly. But the very moment the library is fully stocked and the doors are finally ready to open, those same developers install a massive vault door, slap a padlock on it, and start charging the citizens a monthly subscription fee to read their own diaries.
Wow. Yeah. And the journalist in our text answers the natural consequence of that action perfectly. Society would call that well builder or those library developers liars.
Yeah, definitely.
They planted what Socrates calls the seed of injustice. Because the betrayal isn't just that the water or the books now cost money.
Right.
It's that the raw materials of the project, the community's trust and data, were extracted under totally false pretenses.
Okay, I see the philosophical point, but does the sheer scale of the endeavor give them a moral pass?
What do you mean?
Well, building artificial general intelligence, or AGI, it requires massive, totally unprecedented resources. We're talking about tens of thousands of specialized microchips, entire data centers, massive power grids.
It's incredibly expensive.
Right. So does the morality shift when the cost of keeping the promise hits like $10 billion?
Well, according to the text, Socrates completely rejects the idea that scale alters morality. In fact, he argues it amplifies it.
Really? How so?
He says that stripping away the excuse of scale reveals that a promise made to all of humanity is the ultimate public trust.
Ah.
When that thinking machine proved it could actually generate immense wealth, the architects quietly changed the locks.
Right.
Socrates argues the fundamental nature of a broken oath doesn't just evaporate because your infrastructure cost went up. The betrayal simply affects a much larger population.
Which brings us to the defense, because having established the mechanics of this broken public oath, we have to look at the justification.
We do.
Like, is breaking an oath always an act of pure greed, or can it be a necessary act of survival? This leads us directly to the core defense made by supporters of OpenAI, which the journalist presents to Socrates.
And that defense centers entirely on the geopolitical reality of the AI arms race.
Yeah, the global context.
The defenders argue that without that massive influx of venture capital, they simply could not compete. They point to rival nations, specifically referencing a powerful authoritarian rival civilization in the East, who are racing to build the exact same AGI technology.
Right.
But those foreign rivals are building it with absolutely no ethical constraints and no promises to humanity at all.
So the argument is basically adapt or lose. They're telling the public, look, we had to break our oath to humanity in order to protect humanity from those who never made an oath in the first place.
Exactly.
Like if they stayed a small, underfunded nonprofit, the authoritarian rivals would cross the finish line first, and then humanity would truly suffer.
And Socrates' reaction to this modern defense is incredibly telling.
What does he say?
Well, he gives this slight smile and notes that this is a very, very old argument.
Okay.
He counters this whole tech defense with ancient history, pointing out that this is the exact justification used by every tyrant who ever seized unconstitutional power in Athens.
Oh, wow. So the tyrant stands on the city walls and says, I do this for your protection. Give me ultimate power because the army marching toward our gates is far worse than I am.
Precisely.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I have to push back hard on Socrates here.
Okay, let's hear it.
We aren't in ancient Athens. Isn't adapt or lose a valid, totally inescapable reality in a global tech arms race?
It's a fair point.
Right, because if OpenAI doesn't take the billions to buy the compute power, a foreign adversary genuinely might get AGI first. Is Socrates just sitting in his philosophical ivory tower, ignoring the stark realities of global competition?
Well, that tension is the central pillar of the source material. But Socrates isn't merely comparing tech CEOs to tyrants in terms of cruelty.
Okay.
He is dissecting the specific mechanism of justification, the philosophical danger of the state of exception. The idea that the rules must be suspended for an emergency is what happens after the emergency is allegedly handled.
Oh, because the tyrant never actually gives the power back.
Exactly. The history of absolute power shows it is a one-way street.
Always.
Socrates points out that once a leader holds power they originally promised never to hold, their whole psychology shifts. They convince themselves that their continued dominance is the protection.
Wow.
The leader looks back at their original promise, that oath to humanity, and just dismisses it as a naive error of their younger, less enlightened self.
So Socrates is warning us that using a geopolitical arms race to justify abandoning a foundational moral oath is the exact recipe for unaccountable, permanent power.
That's his core argument there, yeah.
Okay, well, if the defense of "we had to break our word to save you" is historically the favorite playbook of tyrants, then we have to turn our attention to the person pointing the finger. We have to examine the accuser.
Yes, Elon Musk.
Right, because just because OpenAI might be utilizing the logic of an Athenian tyrant, does that mean Elon Musk is some sort of saintly whistleblower?
And the journalist in the text brings up this exact contradiction. They push back on Socrates, pointing out that the accuser's hands are far from clean.
Very far.
Musk left OpenAI citing safety and ethical concerns, but he didn't just walk away and advocate for regulation.
No, he did the exact opposite. He went and founded his own massive for-profit competitor, XAI, to build his own thinking machines.
Right.
So the journalist rightly asks the philosopher, is this multi-billion-dollar lawsuit actually about a broken oath to humanity, or is it just about competitive advantage?
Is it just a power play?
Exactly. Is the accuser just weaponizing ethics because he's furious he isn't the one controlling the market?
And Socrates handles this by separating the message from the messenger. He essentially tells the journalist that they're finally thinking like a philosopher. He
Nice.
introduces this concept that a man can be entirely correct in what he says, but thoroughly correct in why he says it.
Okay, let's use the analogy the text provides here because I think it makes it really clear. If I see a guy pickpocketing someone on the street and I drag him into court and accuse him of being a thief,
Okay.
but my secret motive is that I just wanted to rob him myself.
Your underlying greed does not alter the objective reality that he is a thief.
Exactly.
The accused pickpocket cannot stand before the jury and demand his own innocence simply by pointing at your flawed character.
Right, like, hey, he's greedy too. Doesn't work.
No, the text distills this perfectly. Guilt does not cancel guilt.
Guilt does not cancel guilt. So what does this all mean? Applying that to the public spectacle we watch unfold every day on social
A
media?
lot of drama.
It is. It's incredibly easy for us to get swept up in the billionaire drama. We analyze the passive-aggressive tweets, we debate the rivalries, we hyper-focus on the accuser's hypocrisy or his hidden financial agendas.
Yeah, that's what gets the clicks.
But the framework here demands we ask ourselves, are we letting our personal opinions about Elon Musk's motives distract us from the central issue?
And Socrates argues that we absolutely are. He urges the journalist not to be mesmerized by the motives of the accuser.
Right.
The core philosophical questions exist entirely independent of the lawsuit. Was a sacred promise made to the public? Yes. Was that promise structurally dismantled and broken? It appears so.
Yeah.
Does breaking a promise to all of humanity carry profound moral weight? Socrates concludes that it does, regardless of whether a saint or a rival billionaire is the one pointing it out.
Okay. So if we accept that the motives of the accuser don't matter, and we recognize the adapt or lose defense as the classic tool of the tyrant, we're left with a pretty terrifying problem.
Which is,
How on earth do we, the public, actually judge the accused? What is the actual metric for evaluating a broken promise of this magnitude?
Socrates suggests it all comes down to the mechanics of how the shift from non-profit to capped profit occurred. Okay? He introduces a final framework for judgment. He divides the breaking of an oath into two distinct categories, tragedy versus betrayal.
Let's define those terms within this context.
Well, a tragedy, according to Socrates, is when a man makes a genuine promise, but the world changes beyond his imagining, rendering the promise impossible to keep.
Okay.
He fights to maintain his oath, but the structural realities of the universe force his hand.
So he tried.
Yes. A betrayal, however, is when a man makes a promise fully knowing it will earn him public trust and vital resources, only to abandon it the exact moment. Keeping the promise becomes a financial hindrance.
So in a tragedy, you tried and failed. In a betrayal, you used virtue as a marketing gimmick.
Exactly. And Socrates views that second option, using virtue, as a tool of deception, as one of the gravest offenses against society.
Really? The gravest?
Yeah, because it doesn't just harm the people involved in that specific transaction, it destroys the social fabric. It poisons the well of trust for everyone who comes after.
Oh, that makes sense.
If the public watches a globally recognized nonprofit pivot into a multi-billion-dollar corporation, nobody will ever believe the next innovator who comes along with a genuinely virtuous mission.
So the ultimate question the jury must ask is, when generating massive profit became technologically possible, did the leaders of OpenAI resist?
Right.
Did they struggle and mourn the oath they were breaking? Or did they move swiftly and smoothly with the practiced ease of men who had decided to pivot long before?
That's the test.
But I have to jump in here and challenge the practicality of this test.
Okay, why?
Are we supposed to look for tear-stained pitch decks? I mean, we don't get SEC filings detailing a CEO's sleepless nights or moral agony.
No, we definitely don't.
Corporate PR teams exist solely to make every transition look smooth and inevitable. How can we possibly measure mourning in a boardroom?
It's a vital critique. We cannot audit a CEO's soul. But Socrates isn't demanding a public display of weeping.
What's he looking for then?
He's demanding evidence of systemic structural hesitation. If keeping the nonprofit promise was truly the goal, we would see observable friction. We have to look at the timeline. Did they exhaust every other avenue before taking private venture capital?
What would that even look like in reality, though?
It would look like a massive public campaign. Did they attempt to crowdsource the billions needed for compute power directly from the global public?
Okay.
Did they spend years lobbying the United Nations or coalitions of democratic governments to build a public international AI infrastructure, like, say, a CERN for artificial intelligence?
Wow. Yeah, that would be structural friction.
Exactly. If they tried all of those structural alternatives and met a brick wall, then pivoting to private capital might be viewed as a tragic necessity.
Right.
But if they bypassed the structural struggle and simply created a cap-profit subsidiary to quietly absorb billions in private investment.
Which is pretty much what happened.
Right. That speed and lack of transparent systemic friction points away from tragedy.
It points directly to a calculated betrayal, the question no court will ask, as Socrates puts it at the end of the text.
Yes.
Because a legal court looks at fiduciary duty and breached contracts. Socrates forces us to look at the foundational soul of the organization.
And that is the brilliance of applying this ancient Socratic logic to our modern dispute. When you strip away the dazzling complexity of neural networks and the staggering amounts of capital, you aren't left with a technology problem.
No.
You are left with a painfully simple, relatable human problem about trust, temptation, and the keeping of your word.
It fundamentally changes how you consume the news cycle. I mean, we aren't here to decide the legal victor between these two tech giants.
No, that's for the lawyers.
Right. But this framework, the tragedy versus betrayal metric, the understanding that guilt does not cancel guilt, the recognition of the tyrant's justification, it gives us a toolkit to evaluate the industry itself.
Exactly.
We stop asking who is richer or who has the faster model, and we start asking who is keeping their earth.
Because the foundational layer of artificial intelligence isn't the code. It is the ethics of the architects writing the code.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought for you to take away from this deep dive. Something to really mull over as these technologies become a daily part of your life.
It's a big one.
Throughout our discussion of the source material, we've talked about Socrates warning that using virtue as a deception poisons the well of trust itself.
Right.
He was talking about the company, the institution, and the people in charge. But think about what this specific institution is actually building.
They are building the thinking machine, the oracle that will eventually answer humanity's questions.
Exactly. So what if, in the case of artificial intelligence, the well isn't just the company? What if the well is the machine itself?
The implications of that are genuinely chilling.
I know. If the very foundation of an AI's development is rooted in a broken promise,
If the data was gathered under the guise of public benefit,
and the models were trained within a corporate structure that abandoned its original moral oath the absolute moment it became profitable.
then can we truly trust the ethical boundaries of the answers that machine eventually gives us?
It forces us to ask if the architects poison their own well of trust in the pursuit of scale,
Is the water the AI serves us actually safe to drink?
if the foundational layer of the code is a betrayal, the outputs might carry the ghost of that deception.
Yeah.
Something to think about the next time you sit down, open your laptop, and ask a chatbot to help you solve a problem.